could you use the concepts of numbers or quantity in a nature journal? Leave a message in the comments. This nature journal flip through or nature journal tour features cards that I made for a nature journal challenge that is called Nature Numbers November. The host of the challenge is Eva Moore. My name is Kathleen Arola-Johnson. Thanks for subscribing here to Creative Solace Studios. For this nature journal, I did one prompt per day for the entire month on a card. So a nature journal doesn't just have to be a book. Stay tuned in this nature journal tour for some of my favorite pages, which are measuring our dogs. They had fun with that one. And mapping the movement of constellations through the night sky. Also stay tuned for the end for a special dedication of who I dedicated this project to. Thanks again for clicking the subscribe button to Creative Solace Studios and liking this video. Let's take a look. This is a narrated nature journal flip through. I also have a time-lapsed one that's sped up that I'll link in the comments to this video. The purpose of this study is to study numbers and quantification in nature, kind of like a scientist. A lot of my nature journal projects are more like nature art journals, so this one was fun to have a different flavor to it, and I really liked that the prompts were very open-ended. So these are what the prompts looked like. For example, percentages, size comparison of birds, moonlight, different prompts that could be customized to what I might want to study. November 1st was day one. The prompt was Birdsong Tempo. I have that wonderful app, Merlin Sound ID, and this is what the sonogram recording of a mockingbird looked like, and I recorded the time in seconds at the bottom, and a Gila woodpecker's sound as well. At the end, I did some thoughts and some reflections about that prompt. Day number 2, and these prompts could be done in any order. The topic was shapes in nature, circle or sphere. So I spent a lot of time examining botanical plants. I live in the desert and I do have some container gardens in the backyard, and I tried to decipher what is a circle compared to an oval. So I found some circular shapes in my backyard in individual plants, and then also a whole plant in the overall shape of a circle like this agave. I included some questions at the back and also some ponderings about light source and how a shadow cast by a sphere can change shape. Day 3, the size comparison was leaves. I actually traced some of the herbs that I was growing in the backyard, as well as measured them in millimeters, adding the process of how I did it on the back, some questions that I have, and arranging them from small to large to compare them to one another. For the flower parts on day 4, I also found some fun examples in my backyard of vinca or periwinkle and Cape honeysuckle. I did some little dissections and pulled apart these flowers to examine the different parts of them, such as the stamen and the petals and the flower lobes. On day 5, I chose to tackle biometrics. In this way, I was comparing measurements to my body, to my ankle, to my knee, navel, shoulder, and crown. I listed some things in the backyard that were approximately each of those measurements in relation to me, and then I sketched them out here. And I thought, how fun is that to be able to do that in the field? You don't always have to measure something with a ruler. You could measure yourself and later compare it to standardized measurements, but you can get an overall estimation by comparing things to you. The 6th prompt was Shapes in Nature Oval. So now I looked for some more elongated circles. The fun one here was our cattle dog mix. It had been raining outside, and when I came in with her after looking at this bark and this leaf, her paws were wet and she left little footprints. And so I was like, wait a minute, Tilly. And I stamped her paw on here. I saw those little ovals in her 4 toes on her right front foot and documented that on this nature journal card. Day 7 also brought me to the realm of our dogs. This is Tilly the cattle dog. This is Kobe the pug. I measured so many different parts of them, their ears, around their neck, around their tummy, their length of their legs and tail and eyes and feet. I did it all. But then what was fun was that I calculated the comparisons of them to each other. And this is the mixture of Tilly's breeds. We did have her DNA done. My conclusions were interesting. Both body lengths and heights are close to a square proportionally, but Kobe the pug, surprise, surprise, has a larger tummy in proportion to the rest of his body. And then I did some other comparisons there, and that was a really fun one to bring nature journaling into my home with our pets. November 8th, there was actually a total lunar eclipse that I documented. I went outside in the early morning hours, documented different stages and different colorings, including this reddish hue for the prompt Moonlight. I also did a quick star map of where the moon was in relation to the constellation Orion and took some notes on the back. For Precipitation, which is the prompt I did on November 9th, I did a loose watercolor sketch of the desert landscape, mostly from memory, looking at a couple of my reference photos. Then on the back, I did some graphs, both of Arizona and Minnesota, where I'm from and where I live now, comparing the precipitation by month over the course of the year. On November 10th, the percentages that I was studying was dead versus alive. I have a lavender plant in a container garden on my back patio, and a lot of it is not doing too well, is kind of dying out on the bottom of the stems and losing leaves, dry and brittle. I did some percentages over here, 50% of each branch, the lower part of the branch, the leaves look dry and dead. I pruned 10% of the branches because they were 100% brittle, and so on and so forth about this particular plant. For November 11th, this one was kind of fun because even though I knew what the results would be, it's fun to do an experiment from time to time. I compared, the prompt is speed comparison. I didn't necessarily do speed. My heart rate wasn't speeding, but the rate of my heart. The rate of my heart when I was sitting, after 10 minutes of guided meditation, and after 1 minute of jogging in place, and did it follow my predictions and what that data looked like. Just a fun piece of medical or body science to go into nature journaling. November 12th is when I took up the free choice option and I chose metadata. Metadata is when you put some specific summarizing basic information about where you are or the conditions around you when you're doing a nature journal. For example, the date, the time, the location, the temperature, things like that. The research that I did on this page was by Roseanne Hansen. I looked at some of her books and her work, her examples on metadata, as well as John Muir Laws on his website and YouTube channel, seeing some different examples of how to record maps or moon phases at the same time as not having that be your main nature journal piece, but having it be over in the corner or at the top or on the side of your page to inform the rest of your page. There was also a nice example by Kate Rudder that I referenced down here. On November 13th, moving along to percentages of cloud cover. This one I sat outside in the backyard at 3 different times, estimating percentage of clouds that were in the sky, and then doing some little reference charts and holding that up to the sky to reference percentages of cloud cover. November 14th also brought me into the backyard to observe, there's an Anna's hummingbird that regularly visits some of my Cape honeysuckle flowers. The prompt is speed fast. I did some sketches of the hummingbird. I did have to resort to taking some photos to get some shapes of those wings because those are fast wings. I did field observations and some online research about hummingbirds typically traveling 25 miles per hour, but going up to 61 miles per hour, and those wing beats 40 to 80 per second. So lots of interesting information about a bird that I was able to observe in person, but then research a little bit more online. In contrast with that, the next prompt that I selected was speed slow. I sat on that back patio, looked in the air, and saw these little somethings floating around, little specks. I just did a contemplative pondering. What are the possibilities? What could those things be floating in the air? Did they come from a tree, such as pollen, dust, seeds? Did they come from the ground, like dirt floating up? Is it a sunlight reflection, insects? What could those objects be floating around? I like how nature journaling can answer a lot of questions, and it's okay to pose questions and not have the answers. On November 16th, I took up the topic of constellations. This is the one where I mapped some constellations' movements through the sky at night. I did some thin black gesso painting here, then took a white Signo gel pen to position Orion and Taurus at different times through the night. Interestingly enough, Mars was also present right in between Taurus's horns during that time period. This is one of the projects that I would like to do again in a bigger nature journal page when I have more room to plan this out some more, maybe fit some more constellations in there. What's so interesting is the rotation of the Earth as we're looking at constellations at different time periods. For the 17th day of this Nature Journaling Challenge, the topic studied was shapes in nature again, square or box. I didn't see any direct observations of this in my backyard, so I resorted to some online research, came up with salt, sketched my salt shaker, then I took some salt, dropped it on top of watercolor, and sketched some different views of the makeup of salt as seen under a microscope online. This one was even table salt in an electron microscope. So I did enjoy the combination of personal observations, reflections, questions, and online research that I did in this particular nature journal project. For the 18th, Shapes in Nature brought me to rectangle. Again, on the computer, I looked up some plant cell diagrams. It had been years since I investigated what goes on in those plant cells. So I researched it, did some coloring. It was fun. It was interesting. They are somewhat rectangular. And in the front yard, I took a look at a neighbor's cactus broke it down into shapes of rectangles and did a sketch of that, as well as a Great Dane that I saw out and about in the city. On the 19th, the types of shapes that I was observing were trapezoids. I've done a lot of plants and animals, but I wanted to make sure that I included other types of nature. So I looked at my citrine crystal. The sides of it were basically trapezoids. I researched about a nebula in the Orion constellation that is in a trapezoid arrangement. Then I started thinking, well, I actually have seen a rough trapezoid when I look at different buttes, such as in Sedona, Arizona. And I looked at one of my photographs and recorded the view of the courthouse butte that I had there, did some basic vocabulary of trapezoids, and added that to this page. Spirals were next for the 20th. This brought me to the golden ratio, Fibonacci number sequence, spirals, all of those fun things, and questions. Trying to discern in practical examples that I saw in front of me, not just things I researched online, the close connection between spirals or fractals and the difference or similarities. Are they the same or are they different? Which brings us to fractals on the 21st. I did do some definitions on the front and then some sketches in the back of leaves branching out into repeating patterns, and came up with a brainstorm list of other things that do that same sort of a fractal imagery. Tessellations, another similar topic. This one did bring me to some online research again of honeycomb, different animals that had that sort of a repeating shape pattern. I did see a wing of a dragonfly in the driveway, and I looked very closely at those sections in the wing, trying to find out were there tessellations there. Same thing on some patterning of goose feathers. On the 23rd, I was back to observing the dogs, the pug, the cattle dog, and my leg. How long are our legs? We've got the length of a 12 by 12 tiles in our house. And for the prompt Biometrics pace, this isn't exactly pace, but this is where my inquiry took me, is how many steps walking at an average pace do our two dogs and I take to walk across 2 floor tiles? So I set up a little experiment there and found out about that. Did another experiment with the pace of walking around the perimeter of our swimming pool outside. Did some fun explorations in that kind of way. Size comparison, you choose, came on the 24th. This was Thanksgiving, and I thought it would be fun to bring my family, since I'm thankful for my family, into this day's investigation. So for size comparison, I chose my family's hands, including the dogs, color-coded and one on top of each other to get the comparison. And it was nice to share the rest of this project with my family as well, so they could see what I'd been up to. On the 25th, we were doing some traveling between 2 locations, latitude and longitude. I looked them up, and I looked up where it was in relation to the entire Earth, and did a sketch of latitude and longitude for the Earth. On the 26th, this daylight prompt was interesting because I did not plan it out ahead of time. I just happened to notice on this day an immediate light change. It was at 5:17 p.m. And I thought, oh, daylight, I wonder when the actual technical time of sunset was. Looked it up, and there it was at 5:16. So very close to when I was able to perceive the light change,
which brought me to do a little research about daylight length and things like that. Still on vacation on the 27th, I looked at percentages of ground cover behind the cabin that we were staying in. I did a color-coded key at the bottom of the different surfaces right behind our cabin's backyard. There was grass, gravel, big leaf periwinkle, a vinca, a ponderosa pine tree right here, and some of that periwinkle, these stripes was going under that tree, so they're crossing. And I did rough estimates of the percentage of each item in the ground cover. On the 28th, the comparison was birds. I looked around me, and these are birds that I happened to observe that day. I did some little arrows of their behavior paths in the sky. Then I arranged them from small to large, starting with the small white-breasted nuthatch, all the way up to the common raven. And I do have to say that that belted kingfisher was a special sight right there. The online research brought me to make a little chart of length, width, and wingspan. For the 29th day of this nature journaling challenge, I was set with height comparison of trees. I tried it in a couple ways. I downloaded an app, tried to figure out how to get that to work, and then I also estimated with my eyes how much did I think I chose 6 feet as the baseline, and then estimated that going up. These were tall ponderosa pine trees, and so I compared more than one of the same species of tree. I would like to get better at this estimating of height of trees because that was a good workout for my brain on that day. On the 30th, I was really saving this one, putting it off for last because I didn't know quite how to do it. Size comparison, summer versus winter. And then I thought, wow, we had vacationed at this same ranch in the summer. So I scrolled through my phone, looked up a photo of a location where there was Arizona wild grape in the summer, went to that same location at the time that we were in there in the winter when it looked like the plant was dead, but really it's dormant. So I did some research there and compared between those 2 seasons, one particular plant. At the end of all of this research and inquiry, I came up with some really nice reflections, which I think are important to do at the end of something so you can think, well, I did this thing, but what did I get out of it? What did I learn? How did I grow? So, wow, focusing on numbers and quantification broadened my nature journaling. I did all sorts of crazy things in here that I hadn't done before just because I accepted this challenge of doing this Nature Numbers November. The prompts gave my brain a workout. They made me think of different types of quantification observations. I thought in different ways. This style of nature journaling opened me up to thinking like a scientist in terms of inquiry and data and experiment and research. I also liked that I worked small on these tiny cards that I cut. I did this purposely because I thought, wow, this challenge could get to be overwhelming because it's big topics. You could go on and on about one of these. So I purposely chose a small format so I wouldn't get overwhelmed, so I'd stay on task and keep up with it each day. And it forced me to distill my learning and my inquiry to the main ideas. Besides, it was portable. I could take these outside with me. So this project was also special to me and has a special place in my heart because I'm dedicating it to my dad, Dale James Arola. My dad was a math teacher, high school math teacher for 30 years, and he was very insightful in terms of observing nature, considering nature, teaching me to respect and process and investigate about it. He also had an analytical mind, which taught me to think critically and question and don't just trust answers, but research things on my own. So yes, this is dedicated to my dad. Thanks, Dad, for sharing your analytical mind with me and inspiring me in this fun nature journaling research. Thanks for nature journaling with me, and I hope that this gives you some ideas to do in a nature journal for yourself. Let me know in the comments what other ideas you have about ways to show numbers or quantity while you're recording something in a nature journal.